What's nice about working also in a church environment, having worked in a church myself, is that you're constantly doing stuff. It's like, okay, cool, there's a non-profit or whatever, we need to go to a video for that. Okay, cool, next week it's like...
And if there's not, someone's going to find a video for you to make.
Yeah.
You're like, you're free, oh, here's something.
So there's always stuff to do. The emphasis on yourself on how you're going to take your game to the next level. And also having met and come across some of the guys in the industry, it's the same stuff. It's the same camera that you've got, and it's the same flipping premiere that you've got, but they just do some of the craziest things, you know. So we're just going to teach you how the stuff works. It's up to you to take that to the next level and to push yourself. And also just with editing, there's a lot of the stuff as well that happens with the stuff is that the viewer is taking it on a subconscious level. One of the things, the key components of editing is rhythm and pace. Okay? So subconsciously, there's a certain rhythm of whatever you're watching that it's moving at. Whether it's an action sequence, you'll notice a lot of action sequence, high action, it's going to be a lot of cuts. When it's long, dramatic, whatever, it's going to be a long, more stretched out. So each clip is on the screen for a lot longer. So even sometimes you've got the story, you've got the outline, you know what the whole thing is going to look like. But the first thing that you got to do is to make your edit process a lot quicker and a lot easier. Find the music and then everything else, kind of. But obviously, remember that the music has to be consistent with what the story is about and what the story is trying to communicate. And so then, when that's on, then it's easier too. Because a lot of the times you're watching stuff and it just feels out. You don't know what it is, and then when you watch it, it's like, oh, okay.
It's also movement in your edits. So like actions that guys are doing, like someone's opening and closing a door, and you change the angle during that cut of them opening and closing the door. You don't want to see it repeating. So like if the door's halfway closed, when you make your cut, it must actually be slightly more closed again. It mustn't be like wide open again. That kind of thing. Especially with the multicams, if you're trying to hide a mistake when the preacher's talking. If his hands are up here and you suddenly go to a cut and his hands are down there, awkward vibes. And it's super hard when it's like you're trying to correct the audio and you don't have cutaways to hide it or whatever. So that's often hard. So you got to look for those kind of things. Try and then cut it on a breath where his hands are down, or find another shot. Yeah, it makes it really difficult, or you got to try cheat it. But it's all about the edit mustn't be noticed. Yeah. When you watch a program, so you've got to feel it. That's something, actions that guys are doing, like someone's opening and closing a door, and you change the angle during that cut of them opening and closing the door. You don't want to see it repeating. So like if the door's halfway closed, when you make your cut, it must actually be slightly more closed again. It mustn't be like wide open again. That kind of thing. Especially with the multicams, if you're trying to hide a mistake when the preacher's talking. If his hands are up here and you suddenly go to a cut and his hands are down there, awkward vibes. And it's super hard when it's like you're trying to correct the audio and you don't have cutaways to hide it or whatever. So that's often hard. So you got to look for those kind of things. Try and then cut it on a breath where his hands are down, or find another shot. Yeah, it makes it really difficult, or you got to try cheat it. But it's all about the edit mustn't be noticed. Yeah. When you watch a program, so you've got to feel it. That's something that like you can't teach it. It comes with practice. You can teach the idea behind it. You can teach all the technical stuff, and you can watch as many tutorial videos as you want. But until you start watching your edits and thinking about them in terms of how the feeling is, like, does that cut feel noticeable, or does that cut not exist to the viewer? Like when you watch a movie, how often are you noticing that they cut? Okay, now after working in the industry, you do. But generally, if you sit down and you engross yourself in a film, you're like, okay, sweet. It's just taking on, things are happening. And so that's where like cuts are, you've got like a straight cut is, for me, if you can just straight cut and it's not noticeable, you've done your work well as an editor. and with filming stuff. A dissolve is often, how I like to think of it is passing of time. Use it if it's a passing of time or if you have to hide a hard cut. Nowadays in YouTube, it's become very popular just to straight, people talk to the camera and they're just hard, like jump cut, just straight, and people are like okay with it because it's about getting as much information as you can in a short space of time, and every single YouTuber is talking as fast as they can and just take a breath. It's like, seriously, I can see why the guys want to do it because they want to get a lot of information across. They want to get it across in like 5 minutes because the viewer is going to switch off and not watch anymore. It's okay, but it gets a bit frustrating. Like when you watch some YouTubers, they're just like, they're just redlining the whole time or reading a teleprompter and they're just like getting through the stuff. And it looks really good and it works well sometimes, but it can be tiring by the end of it. You watch a 20-minute video and you're just like, okay, that was like an hour of information in 20 minutes. It's quite an information overload. So that's the danger as well. Like in cuts, you got to be careful. Like you're not forcing too much info in a short space of time unless you really want to. And it's become more socially acceptable to do these like straight jump cuts and stuff. But I'll give you like a quick example. Yeah, this is a project we're working on. Super rough. But like the first couple seconds, it's like kid walking up, he reaches up. So him reaching up, and he's already got that. Like he's already got the tap. And obviously the water, it didn't actually work when he turned on. We had to turn it on like underground at a different source. So Bongani sitting off camera, telling the kid, turn the tap, and then he turns it here. But it's like him reaching up, and just that like short movement, it's got to feel like one fluid motion, even though it was done in like 3 or 4 different shots. So that's what you're looking for when you're editing, is to try and keep it fluid. So this is obviously a super rough cut, so you'll see there might be some stuff that's like a bit out.
I was thinking like not even really complicated. We're not allowed to play together or give each other.
See, it's like he reaches down to pick at the bucket and then you go to the next shot of him with the bucket. And there, like he walks into frame. You don't leave it as an empty shot waiting for ages for him to walk into frame unless you're purposely wanting to make your viewer feel uncomfortable or unsure of what's happening, where it's coming from. Yeah. So those are like kind of your basic rules, and you break the rules when you want to force something. Have any of you guys watched Mr. Robot? Have you ever noticed the framing is constantly like, it's constantly shot where normally you get what's called looking room. So if you frame in, like me, looking at someone that way, there's space in the frame of where I'm looking because naturally it feels normal. In Mr. Robot, they're constantly doing him talking to someone off screen, and the framing's here, the edge of the frame's here, and he's looking there, and there's all this empty space behind him. And they do that to constantly make the viewer feel like uncomfortable, and it's just a subconscious thing. The viewer doesn't know why. Like, we know why because we've studied this stuff and we're used to working with it, but the viewer is like, oh, this feels awkward and weird, and the whole time the things just feel a little awkward and weird, and it complements the guy's personality, and that's the whole reason that they're doing it. So editing, yeah, like, just practice it. Like, practice it. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed the video. Hit the subscribe button to view our next video in the series. You can also check out our behind the scenes series from some of our travel videos.